Attention deficit/hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD, is a condition that affects how the brain develops and functions. Now, many people think it just means a child can't sit still, but honestly, it is much more complex than that. It's a neurodevelopmental disorder, meaning it begins in childhood and can continue right on into adulthood. The condition impacts the parts of the brain that help us plan, focus, and execute tasks. For a child with ADHD, everyday activities like listening in class, finishing homework, or even waiting their turn in a game can feel like monumental challenges. They aren't being naughty or difficult on purpose. Their brains are simply wired differently, making these tasks genuinely harder for them to manage. The number of children diagnosed with ADHD has been on the rise, and it's now one of the most common childhood disorders. In many countries, it's estimated that around 5 to 7% of school-aged children receive an ADHD diagnosis, which means in a classroom of 30 children, at least 1 or 2 are likely to be affected. The main symptoms are grouped into 2 categories: inattention and hyperactivity or impulsivity. Inattention can look like making careless mistakes, having trouble staying organized, losing things frequently, or seeming not to listen when spoken to directly. On the other side of the coin is hyperactivity and impulsivity. This is the more visible aspect of ADHD that people often associate with the condition. For many years, parents of children with ADHD have wondered about the impact of food on their child's behavior. One of the most persistent and popular theories has centered on food additives. Specifically, artificial food colorings and certain preservatives have been prime suspects. This idea gained significant traction after a series of studies, most notably a major one conducted at Southampton University. These studies suggested a link between the consumption of specific artificial food colors and sodium benzoate and increased hyperactivity in children. The findings were compelling enough to lead to changes in food labeling regulations in Europe, requiring warnings on products containing these additives. The theory is appealing because it offers a simple, tangible villain. It's comforting to think that by just removing a few specific chemicals from a child's diet, their challenging behaviors could improve or even disappear. Parents diligently started reading labels, avoiding brightly colored sweets, drinks, and processed snacks. For some families, this approach seemed to work wonders, and they reported noticeable improvements in their child's focus and calmness. This anecdotal evidence spread quickly through parent support groups and online forums, solidifying the belief that additives were the primary dietary culprits behind ADHD-like symptoms. However, the scientific community has remained somewhat divided on this issue. While some studies did show a small but statistically significant effect, others failed to replicate the findings or found the effect to be very minor for most children. My own research and that of many colleagues are now pointing toward a more comprehensive perspective. Instead of zeroing in on single ingredients like artificial colors or preservatives, we should be looking at the bigger picture, the child's overall dietary pattern. It's not just about what is being added to food, but about the fundamental nature of the food itself. The key argument is that the overall quality of a child's diet, particularly the level of processing, may have a much more profound impact on their behavior and concentration than any single additive. This new perspective suggests that the problem may not be the yellow dye in a lemon-flavored drink, but the fact that the drink itself is an ultra-processed product. Such products are often high in sugar and unhealthy fats while being stripped of essential nutrients like vitamins, minerals, and fiber. These are the very nutrients the brain needs to function optimally. To understand this new perspective on diet and ADHD, we first need to be clear about what we mean by ultra-processed foods, or UPFs. This isn't just any food that comes in a package. The term refers to industrial formulations made mostly or entirely from substances extracted from foods. Real-life examples of ultra-processed foods are everywhere in the modern supermarket. Think of sugary breakfast cereals, packaged cookies and cakes, chicken nuggets, instant noodles, crisps, and fizzy drinks. They are designed to be hyper-palatable, that is, irresistibly tasty, cheap to produce, and have a long shelf life, making them highly convenient and profitable. So, why do people, and especially families, eat so many of these foods? The reasons are complex and deeply embedded in the structure of modern life. Convenience is a massive factor. When we discuss diet choices, it is impossible to ignore the powerful influence of socioeconomic status. The link between poverty and health is well established, and this connection extends to diet and the risk of neurodevelopmental conditions like ADHD. Families with lower incomes often face significant barriers to accessing fresh, healthy food. This can be due to living in what are called food deserts, areas where supermarkets with fresh produce are scarce, and the only options are corner shops stocked with processed, non-perishable items. The higher cost of fresh fruits, vegetables, and lean proteins compared to cheaper, calorie-dense, ultra-processed foods is a major hurdle. This economic reality means that a diet high in ultra-processed foods is not always a simple choice, but a consequence of financial constraints. When a parent is struggling to make ends meet, the priority is to put food on the table that is filling and affordable. Research has started to draw a line connecting these dots. Studies have shown a correlation between low socioeconomic status and a higher prevalence of ADHD diagnoses. While there are many contributing factors to this, including stress and access to healthcare, diet is emerging as a significant potential pathway. If a nutrient-poor, high UPF diet can negatively impact brain development and function, and if this type of diet is more common among disadvantaged families, it stands to reason that it could be a contributing factor to this increased risk. Therefore, blaming parents for their children's diet is not only unhelpful, but also deeply unfair. It ignores the systemic issues that shape food choices. Instead of pointing fingers, we need to focus on solutions that address these root causes. While the discussion often centers on the negative effects of processed foods and additives, it's crucial to understand that the story is more nuanced. Sometimes, even seemingly healthy, natural, and unprocessed foods can trigger behavioral reactions in certain children. This is a confusing and often frustrating reality for parents who are trying their best to provide a nutritious diet. A child might have a sensitivity or intolerance to a specific food that most people would consider to be perfectly wholesome. This highlights the highly individual nature of how our bodies and our brains interact with the foods we eat. Common examples of healthy foods that can cause issues for a minority of children include dairy products, wheat, soy, corn, and even certain fruits like oranges or apples. The reaction is not a classic food allergy that involves hives or breathing difficulties, but rather a more subtle sensitivity that can manifest in behavioral ways. A parent might notice that after their child drinks a glass of milk, they become more irritable, hyperactive, or foggy. Similarly, a food containing wheat might lead to a noticeable decline in concentration the next day. These connections can be difficult to pinpoint because the reaction may not be immediate. These individual sensitivities are not well understood, but they are very real for the families who experience them. The mechanism isn't necessarily about causing ADHD, but rather about triggering symptoms that mimic or worsen those of ADHD. For example, an undiagnosed sensitivity could cause low-grade inflammation or digestive discomfort. And a child who feels physically unwell is naturally going to have more difficulty focusing, regulating their emotions, and sitting still in a classroom. Their disruptive behavior might be a direct result of their physical discomfort rather than a primary neurological issue. And given the complexities we've discussed, it becomes clear why there is no single ADHD diet that works for every child. The idea of a magic bullet, a single food to eliminate, or a single supplement to add is incredibly appealing, but it's a myth. Many parents, desperate for a solution, might try eliminating just food additives, as we've discussed. When they see little or no change in their child's behavior, they may conclude that diet has no role to play at all. This is an unfortunate conclusion, because they may have only addressed a very small part of a much larger dietary issue and given up too soon. The failure of simplistic approaches, like only removing artificial colors, can be explained by the broader dietary context. If a child's diet remains high in sugar, unhealthy fats, and is generally low in essential nutrients, removing a few colorings is unlikely to make a significant difference. Furthermore, focusing on elimination can sometimes create new problems. It can lead to a very restrictive and nutritionally unbalanced diet if not done carefully under professional guidance. A parent might, with the best intentions, remove entire food groups like dairy and gluten. If they don't replace the key nutrients from those foods, like calcium, vitamin D, and B vitamins, they could inadvertently be making the child's nutritional status even worse. This can also create stress and anxiety around mealtimes for both the parent and the child, turning food into a source of conflict rather than nourishment and enjoyment. This is why a holistic view is so essential. Instead of asking, "What can I remove?" a more helpful question is, "What can I add?" The focus should shift towards improving the overall quality of the diet by adding more whole, unprocessed foods. If you suspect a link between your child's diet and their behavior, it can feel overwhelming to know where to start. The most powerful tool you have at your disposal is careful observation. Begin by keeping a detailed food and behavior diary for a couple of weeks. In this diary, you should record everything your child eats and drinks along with the time. Alongside the food log, make notes about their behavior, mood, and concentration levels at different points throughout the day. Note things like periods of high energy, irritability, difficulty focusing, or moments of calm and concentration. After a few weeks of consistent tracking, you can start to look for patterns. Do challenging behaviors seem to cluster a few hours after eating a particular type of meal, like a breakfast high in sugar or a lunch of processed snacks? Do you notice that on days when your child eats more whole foods, their afternoons at homework time are a bit smoother? This diary is not for self-diagnosis, but for gathering information. It provides you with concrete data that you can look at objectively and, more importantly, share with a healthcare professional when you seek advice. Once you have this information, it is absolutely essential to consult with an expert before making any significant changes to your child's diet. This could be your family doctor, a pediatrician, or a registered dietitian or nutritionist who has experience with childhood behavioral issues. Share your diary and your concerns with them. They can help you interpret your findings and rule out other potential medical causes for the behaviors you're seeing. They can also ensure that any dietary changes you make are done safely, without compromising your child's nutritional needs for growth and development. Working with a professional, you might decide to try a systematic elimination diet. In the complex world of ADHD, it is tempting to search for a single, simple answer. However, the truth is that the connection between diet and behavior is not straightforward. While the old theory focusing exclusively on food additives now seems incomplete, the emerging evidence points strongly towards the importance of the whole diet. The prevalence of ultra-processed foods in the modern world presents a significant challenge, potentially depriving developing brains of the very nutrients they need to regulate attention and behavior effectively. This is not about blame, but about understanding the environment in which our children are growing up. The most sensible path forward for parents is to move away from a mindset of restriction and toward one of nourishment. The primary goal should be to provide a varied and balanced diet rich in whole foods. This means aiming for a plate that is colorful with fruits and vegetables, includes lean sources of protein, and is built on a foundation of whole grains and healthy fats. This approach benefits all children, regardless of whether they have an ADHD diagnosis or not. It supports physical growth, cognitive development, and stable energy levels, creating the best possible internal environment for a child to learn and thrive. It is also vital to hold on to the fact that every child is an individual. There is no one-size-fits-all diet that will be perfect for everyone. This is why parental observation, followed by professional consultation, is such a critical combination. By paying close attention and working with experts, you can begin to understand your own child's unique needs. This patient, personalized approach is far more likely to yield positive results than following a generic diet plan from a book or website. Ultimately, diet should be seen as one important component of a comprehensive support plan for a child with ADHD, not as a cure. It works alongside behavioral strategies, educational support, and, when appropriate, medication. By focusing on providing the best possible nutrition, parents can empower their children with a foundational tool for better health and well-being. It's about creating positive, sustainable habits around food, fostering a healthy relationship with eating, and giving your child's brain the fuel it needs